What are tariffs and how they affect lives? From swapping spices in ancient markets to high-stakes showdowns between global superpowers, trade has shaped our world in ways you might not expect. But what happens when trade turns into conflict? Get ready for the wild, surprising, and sometimes downright bizarre tales of tariffs and trade wars that changed history and your everyday life. So, what exactly are tariffs? Tariffs are basically taxes on imports, making foreign goods more expensive to buyers. The idea behind the tariffs is that they are designed to protect local industries and jobs, encourage domestic production, and fund the government. Lately, tariffs have come back in style, with President Trump famously calling himself a tariff man and using them to shake up trade deals, protect U.S. industries, and address concerns about national security. Tariffs can also help reduce trade deficits by discouraging imports, and tariff proponents argue that tough tariffs and even trade wars may sometimes be the only way to challenge unfair or unethical trade practices. But there's a catch. Consumers are the ones who end up paying more than anyone else, and the businessmen and their businesses end up facing uncertainty and many bumps on the road. And while tariffs can provide short-term benefits, the long-term results often depend on whether domestic industries can fill the gap left by pricier imports. For centuries, European powers played a high-stakes game of monopoly, controlling trade to gain the upper hand. Among themselves, they banned exports of raw materials, slapped hefty tariffs on imports like spices and silk, and focused on selling more than they bought. The goal? Hoard as much gold and silver as possible, while using trade to strengthen political power. This strategy, known as mercantilism, made controlling trade the ultimate power move. Perfect example for that was Britain's Navigation Acts. Colonies, like America, were forced to trade exclusively with Britain, sending raw materials out and getting taxed finished goods in return. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just about tea. It was a full-on rebellion against unfair trade policies, setting the stage for trade wars and, in this case, revolution. Trade wars are like a snowball fight. It starts when one kid throws a snowball at another. The other kid retaliates with an even bigger snowball, and soon the whole block gets involved, with teams forming, alliances shifting, and chaos erupting. Businesses, thus far innocent bystanders, get caught in the crossfire or just slip on the icy battlefield. By the end, everyone is cold, bruised, and exhausted, realizing too late that they could have just built a snowman together and enjoy a hot cup of tea. Take the Opium Wars of the 19th century, for example. Britain had a trade deficit with China and started exporting opium to balance things out. The result? Addiction spread throughout China. And when the Chinese government tried to ban the opium trade, Britain responded with military force. The conflict ended with China signing unfair treaties, giving up Hong Kong and opening more ports to British trade. Another example is the United States' Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. This law, intended to protect American industries during the Great Depression, backfired spectacularly. Tariffs on thousands of goods sparked global retaliation, even from most loyal trading partners, collapsing international trade and deepening the recession. In the US, national income plunged, unemployment soared, and imports and exports fell by over 60%. Public confidence in government crumbled, and the political fallout cost President Herbert Hoover his re-election in 1932. Dubbed one of the most damaging laws in US history, it illustrates how trade wars can spiral into widespread economic and political crises, with profound domestic and global consequences. Fast forward to 2018. The US and China, two economic titans, locked horns in yet another dramatic trade war. It began with a 10% tariff on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. That later increased to 25%. China fired back with tariffs on $110 billion of American exports, hitting agriculture and automobiles. Plans for a 10% tariff on $300 billion more goods and raising existing tariffs to 30% were announced, but largely suspended during tense negotiations. The prolonged standoff, marked by rounds of talks and strategic maneuvers, turned this economic clash into a global saga of uncertainty. The impact on the US was huge. American farmers required $61 billion in aid to survive plummeting exports, while industries struggled with disrupted supply chains. Even the Phase 1 trade deal in 2020 couldn't undo the damage. The focus has since shifted to technology, with the US imposing new restrictions on AI chips and renewable energy products. What began as a trade war has now morphed into a high-stakes tech race, reshaping the US economy and redefining its role on the global stage. The Chicken War began in 1962, when the European Economic Community raised steep tariffs and imposed price controls on imported US poultry to protect its domestic industry and promote self-sufficiency. This led to a significant decline in US exports, prompting the United States to retaliate by imposing a 25% tariff on imported light trucks, known as the chicken tax. Initially intended as a bargaining chip, this measure eventually became permanent. Since 1982, Canada and the US have been locked in a tug-of-war over softwood lumber. Despite being close trading partners, this lumber feud keeps cropping up until today. In 1985, the US slapped tariffs on European pasta. Europe retaliated by taxing American lemons and walnuts. The 1990s witnessed a long-running dispute over the EU's banana import policies, dubbed the Banana Wars. By giving special treatment to bananas from its former colonies, US companies based in Latin America were left out in the cold. The World Trade Organization intervened, the US imposed tariffs on European goods, and the battle raged for years before finally ending in 2017. In 2002, the US imposed steep tariffs up to 30% on steel imports to protect its struggling steel industry. Canada and Mexico were spared, but the move hit Europe, Japan, South Korea, China, and Brazil. European exporters fired back with threats of tariffs on Michigan-made cars and Florida-grown oranges. World Trade Organization had to intervene again, and the steel war ended in 2003. But the same concerns flared up again in 2018, proving that trade disputes don't just disappear overnight. Although trade wars often appear to be attractive, quick-fix solutions to complex economic issues, history consistently shows us that they're merely temporary patches, like placing a towel on a leaking pipe. Sure, tariffs can momentarily shield industries and secure jobs, but the broader market impact typically includes higher prices for consumers, disrupted supply chains, and strained global markets. Furthermore, ending a trade war isn't as straightforward as it might seem. Negotiations often become complicated political battles, where national pride and political posturing overshadow practical economic concerns. Trade wars also carry unintended consequences. Short-term protections can turn into long-term economic burdens, complicating international relationships and dampening economic growth. Ultimately, the historical record highlights that collaboration, not confrontation, paves the way to sustainable economic success. Creating bridges through cooperative trade relationships, rather than building barriers through protectionism, consistently proves to be the wiser strategy. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, give this video a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this.